All right, good evening. We're going to talk about a lot of topics today. I've been called out by one of our panelists who apparently is too busy but needs proof like the size of the fucking Titanic to prove something that really is self explanatory. But we're going to get to that later. First of all, I'm going to talk about the authorization of use of military force in Yemen, which Bernie Sanders and I think a few other senators did object to correctly. I think that you do need an authorization for use of military force in Yemen, and I believe that the only people who ended up supporting him were Chris Murphy of Connecticut, and then there would be that other guy, Mike Lee of Utah. So I'm surprised Rand Paul wasn't in the equation, but maybe he wasn't there, or maybe he just didn't show up at all, or something like that. So that has to do with Yemen. We have an article here from. Let me see here. Hey Pinochet, he says, "What's up, butt munch?" Well, I don't know what I did to piss you off, but you know, you better be happy because the topic for tonight is gonna make you happy, Pinochet. So shut the fuck up. You're gonna really enjoy the conversation today. Um, so anyway, we got 1 second. Got so many windows open. So we have Senate opts against limiting Trump's war powers. The measure to cease most military actions in Yemen was shot down amid a whirlwind day of White House news. President Donald Trump on Tuesday retained the expanded war powers he inherited from his post 9/11 predecessors as the Senate shot down a measure that would have ordered him to cease most U.S. military operations in Yemen. Trump scored a victory on behalf of the executive branch's ability to launch and sustain military operations in new countries without first getting authorization from Congress. Amid pressure from Republican leaders, the White House and the Pentagon, the chamber killed a resolution 55 to 44 offered by a bipartisan group of senators that would have required Trump to cease all U.S. military action against groups other than Al-Qaeda and in Yemen. Just before the vote started, a White House official said Trump strongly opposes the measure and its underlying premise. That put a president who had campaigned against what he viewed as the Middle East and South Asian military follies of George Bush and Barack Obama squarely in their collective camp on post 9/11 presidential war powers. So, without getting too deep into this, because this isn't the full topic for tonight, but we might as well discuss this. All of these super Trump supporters, you have to be wrong on this. There's no ifs and or buts about it. You need Congress to authorize the use of force in a country like that. The fact that they gave up their duty by giving over the power to Obama and Bush, well, Bush first, but also Obama, it just shows how big of a chamber of pussies we have in Congress. Okay, they complain day and night about Donald Trump, won't shut the fuck up about him, and then when you have the ability to take back some of his power with regards to the war making ability, which was probably one of the main issues that you probably have with him, you don't do anything. So it's a bunch of bullshit. And I'm sad to say I have to agree with Bernie Sanders, who I think is a piece of shit. Pinochet says, unless it's a coup, there should be a two to third approval for a military strike. I think he's agreeing with me. So we'll see later. Also, besides that, another thing, I talked to a friend offline, friend of mine from college, about the issue of drug legalization. And there's a lot of conservatives that are frustrated with the libertarian position that you should legalize all drugs, including hard drugs and heroin. And I totally understand where they're coming from. And I'll try to give, for let's say 10 minutes, my issues with this. Okay, my issues with the Republicans and the conservatives, and my issues with the libertarians, and we can go from there. The issue with legalizing drugs, on the one hand, is that these are addictive substances. So if you were to legalize heroin, cocaine, and so I don't think LSD is addictive, but there's methamphetamine. All of those substances are addictive. In fact, Ron White, who's a hilarious comedian, ran for president in 2016, claiming that he would pursue the death penalty specifically for meth dealers. Specifically, you can look it up. He said that meth is killing entire communities in the country. So it's not as if Trump's approach is unprecedented or that it's something exclusively on the right wing. Ron White he's from the South, but I wouldn't call him a right winger. Other than that, he is a libertarian. He was a pro-gay marriage guy, all of that stuff. So Ron White, who, he campaigned for that, he's otherwise a libertarian. So this is an issue that it crosses party lines, it crosses ideological definitions. What I see as the issue with legalizing these substances is that it is addictive. It does harm the public health. And that's why I hesitate to endorse fully legalizing all illegal recreational drugs. With marijuana, I see less of a reason to legalize it. I don't see why marijuana should not be the same as alcohol. I'm not endorsing people smoking marijuana. I think that there are health consequences to it. I think that there's certainly issues with overuse and with how it affects some people's metabolism or their motivation. So we're not talking about me advocating for people to go out and smoke and do and shoot up heroin. Certainly not. I've had I think I've had 3 friends that died from heroin. I have three friends that died from drug overdoses. I think 2 of them were for heroin. They it's not like all of them were close friends, but you know what I'm talking about. So we live in a country where heroin is illegal. People are still able to obtain it, and they're overdosing from it. So why is it that I'm also against drug prohibitionism the way it is right now? Well, we're spending billions of dollars a year in countries like Colombia and Afghanistan, and I believe in Thailand and other places in that region, to interdict drug trafficking at the source. And it is a drug war. You are using military forces to fight against plants and against drug gangs over there. So it's a tremendous expenditure. Ultimately, the drugs still reach the market. It's very difficult when you to see the yield from this war, when you're seeing so many people are still falling they're falling to this plague of drugs coming from the Far East or from South America. So the drug war aspect of it, how are you supposed to support that? It's not working. Donald Trump, I think, is doing a couple focuses that maybe they're slightly more effective, including fighting at the border and in order to interdict drug trafficking at the border more, to find the mules, to prevent illegal aliens from bringing in drugs, but also from Canada as well. Because remember, some of the border areas in the north are also they're good points for smuggling in heroin and other substances. People think that it's an issue with Mexico, but remember that a lot of the drugs come from China. They come from other parts of the world, and it's a major issue. And I don't think that the drug war can be won. There's a hilarious meme. I think it uses the Muppets news news guy. If you've ever seen the news guy from the Muppets, and it says, "We'd like to we'd like to congratulate drugs for winning the war on drugs." So I personally, I understand the concern from conservatives. By the way, Democrats too are not for drug legalization as well. A lot of them are often talking, or they'll talk about it as if they're going to do it, and they don't do it. I think that the problem lies with the Medicaid system. The problem lies with the way insurance companies and other health providers that they have these opioids subsidized and covered under insurance plans. So when somebody is given a painkiller, first of all, they're in a position where they're vulnerable and they need it in order to kill the pain. So they'll probably take it. Uh, there's I mean, I don't think that the majority of people would be able to resist, if they're under excruciating pain, the prescription of an opioid. Okay, so they're in that difficult position, and financially they don't necessarily feel the cost up front. They might have that cost deferred to them, or a lot of it covered under their insurance program, and then the dependency starts. So you get hooked on it when you might have it covered by a plan or even by Medicaid or the VA or one of these other organizations, which would include an insurance company or a healthcare plan that cover these opioids. And that's what creates this market where these opioids are becoming, mass consumed. And then when people become dependent on them, then perhaps they lose their capacity to function at work and at home, and they become strung out. Then they fall into heroin, they fall into others, to street drugs and things like that. So I think the the root cause of this, specifically the opioids, is the way that medicines are being prescribed and the way that they're being financed for the consumer, for the patient. The patient is looked at as a consumer by the pharmaceutical companies and by the insurance companies that are willing to pay for them, and by Medicaid and other plans that are willing to pay for them. So this is a tremendous issue. Let's see here. So in any case, let me just tell my friend that I'm live, this other friend of mine. I share this stream. Somebody. See if he wants to jump on. This is not the guy who I'm calling out today, who thinks that he can basically deny reality. Yeah, this guy's going to sleep anyway. So in any case, what's the next subject? Okay, we have Farrakhan feminism. You know what? Let's leave the Farrakhan feminism for later. Let's leave it for later, because first we do have to get through calling out this friend of ours, number 80, who apparently is busy with school. Let me tell you something. The school starts now, asshole. The school starts now. We had a little disagreement over the fact that I shared an article from Red Elephants, who I've seen a couple of their videos. I wouldn't say I'm generally blown away by their content, because there's a lot of other people that I follow. So, no disrespect, but usually I find their stuff kind of tame. So it said California high school kids taught to recite chant created by a cop killer. Okay, in San Francisco, thousands of students participated in the walkout protest Wednesday, which was supposed to be a demonstration focused around ending gun violence. Leave it to California to quickly screw that up. Following one of the main marches in San Francisco, several hundred grammar school age and high school students were herded to bleacher seats in Ghirardelli Square next to the Maritime Museum. Led by several adults, teachers, college-age students, and Stephen Gong, a junior at Lowell High high school. Several hundred children gathered in a throwback Maoist fashion. Once all the children were seated, some of the leaders of the group proceeded to tell all of the children to raise their fists in the air in preparation for a chant. The raised fist symbolizes the clenched fist of communism. That was made famous by the likes of Karl Marx and communist regimes throughout history. Guadalupe Cisneros was the name on the permit for the gathering. Once the children had their fists raised, the leaders and speakers told them that they were going to recite a chant and that they would get louder and louder as they went along. The chant they recited was coined and made famous by a Black Liberation member, should be the Black Liberation Army member, Assata Shakur, who was found guilty in the 1973 murder of New Jersey State Trooper Werner Forrester. Shakur was incarcerated in several prisons in the 70s. She escaped from U.S. prison in 1979 and has been living in Cuba in political asylum since 1984. Born as Joanne Deborah Byron, Shakur followed Marx's words as law. Aaron Ford, special agent in charge of the FBI's Newark office, said while living openly and freely in Cuba, she continues to maintain and promote her terrorist ideology. She provides anti-U.S. government speeches espousing the Black Liberation Army's message of revolution and terrorism. Shakur was once protected from extradition by now Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who penned a letter to Fidel Castro advocating against extradition of Shakur, a woman she called a freedom fighter. So none of that is, I could show you the video, but once again, when I show you these videos live, you don't hear any volume. But basically what they do is here we go. They basically chant this poem to my people. And it says, Black brothers, Black sisters, I want you to know that I love you, and I hope that somewhere in your hearts you have the love for me. Wait, hold on. She says, I am a Black revolutionary, and as such, I am a victim of all the wrath, hatred, and slander that America is capable of. Like all other Black revolutionaries, America is trying to lynch me. That's incorrect. She was in prison for killing a police officer. I'm a Black revolutionary woman, and because of this, I have been charged with and accused of every alleged crime in which a woman was believed to have participated. What the fuck does that even mean? In which a woman was believed to have participated. The alleged crimes in which only men were supposedly involved, I have been accused of planning. They have plastered pictures alleged to be me in post offices, airports, hotels, police cars, subways, banks, television, and newspapers. They have offered over $50,000 in rewards for my capture, and they have issued orders to shoot on sight and shoot to kill. I am a Black revolutionary, and by definition, that makes me part of the Black Liberation Army. Black revolutionaries do not drop from the moon. We are created by our conditions, shaped by our oppression. We are being manufactured in droves in the ghetto streets, places like Attica, San Quentin, Bedford Hills, Leavenworth, and Sing Sing. They're turning out thousands of us. Many jobless Black veterans and welfare mothers are joining our ranks. Brothers and sisters from all walks of life who are tired of suffering passively make up the BLA. There is and always will be until every Black woman and child is free. A Black Liberation Army. The main function of the Black Liberation Army at this time is to create good examples, to struggle for Black freedom, and to prepare for the future. So then it launches into that chant, and it says, it is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our change. So that part is the part that is the chant. It's always going by. Pinochet says, what could be his issue with red elephants? I watch their content daily. They're in the belly of the beast, Berkeley, etc. Well, number 80 appears to think you've seen number 80 on. He's the nice gentleman from I believe South Central Los Angeles who was here. I think he was on last week, and this week he has a scheduling conflict, which Scheduling conflict or no, you're still going to get your ass kicked on YouTube. And when you come on next time, I'm still going to call you out about this. But he wouldn't stop bothering me because he said, well, so what if you have children going outside for an approved protest? Remember, this is a protest that's fucking approved by a state school in San Francisco, where they go outside, assemble in a formation. Okay, you guys all know that song probably, "Formation" by Beyonce. Okay, another communist basically, but you can see it here. I'll try to show it on screen. You can see the video, but you're just not going to hear the audio. That's the only problem. So you can see them assembled in formation here, raising their fists to the air. And what's the cause here? The cause is gun control. So what is so ironic here? First of all, let's forget the communism for a second. It's hypocrisy, because you're using a raised fist in order to say, oh, we're going to resist the state, we're going to resist the oppressor. Your school lets you go outside, you fucking retards, in order to do this protest. Who are you resisting exactly? So they're raising their fist in favor of gun control and reciting the text of a woman who went to jail for murdering a police officer. Okay, and by the way, that's not the only thing Shakur was convicted of. Let me read you her rap sheet. Okay. I had this somewhere. Okay, here we go. Attempted armed robbery at Statler Hilton Hotel in New York, 1971. Charged in 1977. Bank robbery in Queens, August 1971. Arraigned in 1973. She was acquitted of that. Bank robbery in the Bronx. Okay, that's September 1972. She was arraigned in 1973, acquitted and with a hung jury. Kidnapping of James E. Freeman, December 1972, acquitted. Murder of Richard Nelson, okay, that was 1974, dismissed. She was arraigned in 1974. That the murder occurred in 1973. Attempted murder of policemen Michael O'Reilly and Roy Pollyanna, January 23rd, 1973. That was also dismissed. Turnpike shootout, first-degree murder, second-degree murder, atrocious assault and battery, assault and battery against a police officer, assault with a dangerous weapon, assault with intent to kill, illegal possession of a weapon, and armed robbery. So that was in New Jersey. She was arraigned in 1973. They had to change the venue, I guess, because in New Jersey, I guess she couldn't get a fair trial. Then they had to declare a mistrial because she got pregnant while she was arrested, by the way. So she gets pregnant while she's in prison, while she's in jail, awaiting trial. So they had to delay it again. Then in 1977, she was convicted, and she escapes from prison in 1979. So there are several crimes for which she was accused of that involved illegal weapons, illegal possession of a weapon. Okay, so attempted armed robberies, bank robberies, all of that, kidnappings, things like that. Now, why was she acquitted? She was acquitted because she had a brilliant attorney. I actually talked about him yesterday with somebody I know named Bill Kunstler, who was famous for getting actual hardcore criminals off of trials. You know, they would be accused of murder, especially cop killers, and he was famous for defending them. That's the only reason Assata Shakur was able to avoid avoid getting thrown in prison. All because of Bill Kunstler, by the way, who was a brilliant attorney. And the way he would usually get people off. So again, she was she was convicted in a court of law of murdering a police officer. The fact is that she escaped prison because she said she couldn't get a fair trial in the United States. So how is it that she was acquitted on several other charges, or the charges were dismissed? Okay, and then she just kept committing crimes. All right, because she just went on this crime spree for years. She was so radical she got kicked out of the Black Panthers. That's why there is a Black Liberation Army, or was one. So that is. Let me see if there's anybody in the chat right now. More of a Tina Turner fan. Okay. All right, we have Johnny Bennett here. I didn't know. I think he might be a new watcher. So welcome to the show. Let us know where you're watching from. In any case, let's keep going. So number 80's whole problem with this was that he thought, why should you care if a bunch of children who are protesting against gun violence are going out, raising their fists in the air, and reciting the words of a communist revolutionary who went to prison for killing a police officer with an illegal handgun? I don't see. I mean, do you guys see the problem? I don't. I mean, you're protesting against these people. The protest on March 14th, by the way, was in order to get more gun control laws passed. So they're using the chant of a woman who killed somebody with an illegal handgun as their calling cry. You know, their war cry. They're saying, "Oh, we're gonna fight the system. We're gonna get guns banned," by chanting the quote from a woman who was a communist revolutionary for the Black Liberation Army, and she went to prison for killing a police officer with an illegal handgun. So how exactly is that consistent, number 80? I'd like to hear that. Now, the other complaint that he had, which was really the dumbest I've ever heard, is how do I prove that Joanne Chesimard, who is that's the original name of I think that might be her married name. So her name is now Assata Shakur. She lives in Cuba now because she escaped from prison after years of being a Black revolutionary. So she escapes from prison and runs away to Cuba for asylum. And you're trying to say, oh, she's not a communist. Just because she went to Cuba, our communist neighbor, with Fidel Castro, a country where, you know, people run away from in rafts in order to get here because they can barely, you know, they have to drive cars that are from 1959 or earlier. So you're trying to say, I need to prove that she's a communist? Pinochet says the term "we have nothing to lose but our chains" is being used by a disturbing number of movements. Dog whistle. So let's address her thing about Black liberation. Now, yes, when Assata Shakur was growing up in, I believe it was, let me see, she came from Queens. So she's from Queens, and she claimed that she was fighting for the liberation of Black people from the racist, oppressive system of the United States and against slavery and all of that. Well, if that were a true statement, okay, then then how about this? Why is it that she never ended up donning a uniform? She was an urban guerrilla, okay? Basically, what she would do, says here, she grew up in Flushing, Queens, grew up in New York City and Wilmington, North Carolina. After she ran away from home several times, her aunt, who would later act as one of her lawyers, took her in. She became involved in political activism at Borough of Manhattan Community College and City College of New York. So she got an education at state institutions that radicalized her. Okay, so already in the 1960s, you had state institutions where people are getting radicalized. So how is that the slave system, you fucking idiot, number 80? That's oppressing her. She gets education at a state fucking school, and she gets radicalized over there. After graduation, she began using the name Assata Shakur and briefly joined the Black Panther Party. She then joined the Black Liberation Army, a loosely knit offshoot of the Black Panthers, which led an armed struggle against the U.S. government through tactics such as holding up banks and killing police officers and drug dealers. Between 1971 and 1973, she was charged with several crimes and was the subject of a multi-state manhunt. So basically, here's another contradiction here. The Black Liberation Army would kill drug dealers extrajudicially, but they always complained that the U.S. government would kill black people for nonviolent crimes. So there's your contradiction. That's step one of communist revolution: extrajudicial punishment of crimes. Okay, you hold the trial when the person's already been convicted. You hold the trial and then you find the crime. So then, between 1971 and 1973, she was charged with several crimes and was the subject of a multi-state manhunt. In May 1973, Shakur was arrested after being wounded in a shootout on the New Jersey Turnpike. Also involved in the shooting were New Jersey State Troopers Werner Forster and James Harper, and BLA members Sundiata Akoli and Zaid Malik Shakur. Harper was wounded, Zaid was killed, Forster was killed by Akoli. Between 1973 and 1977, she was charged with murder, attempted murder, armed robbery, bank robbery, and kidnapping in relation to the shootout and 6 other incidents. She was acquitted on 3 other charges and 3 were dismissed. In 1977, she was convicted of the murder of Forster. Under New Jersey law, the prosecution did not need to prove that Shakur fired the shots that killed either Forster or Zaid Shakur. And of 7 other felonies related to the shootout in a trial her supporters argue was unfair. So what's unfair about the trial? She's a part of a liberation movement that kills drug dealers extrajudicially. So how is the trial unfair? Okay, if you want to talk about white supremacy, how is this unfair when she herself is involved in a group that kills drug dealers extrajudicially? So then another issue that I keep having with these people, with number 80, is that he says, well, okay, so she's for black liberation and she's fighting against the oppressors. How does that make her a communist? Well, it happens to be that the Black Panther Party, which he loves, he basically can't shut the fuck up about the Black Panther Party and about community policing, which he can't even explain. He number 80 loves to talk about community policing, and he thinks that it's a solution to fucking everything. If you have a gluten allergy, you need community policing. He says I talk all the time about Marxists, but he doesn't have any sources for anything he talks about, and I do. So community policing, he thinks, can probably solve, the flat Earth theory. It can solve basically, why, male impotence. It can solve, any issue that comes up in the world. If you have, a receding hairline, community policing, the Panthers. If you have basically, your kid can't read good, like Derek Zoolander, community policing, that's the solution to everything. So I have here from the BBC, okay, not right-wing media. The BBC is basically hard left media right now. And it says here, okay, this is, here, I'll highlight this all. During the Cultural Revolution, in which millions were persecuted or killed, owning it, which is the Mao's Red Book, over here at the top, became a way of surviving, says Daniel Lees, professor of modern Chinese history and politics at the University of Freiburg. Okay, I think that's in Germany. Paramilitary Red Guards mobilized by Mao to purify the Communist Party would check whether those suspected of bourgeois tendencies were carrying it or whether they could quote from it. As the regime attempted to export its ideas as a form of soft power, millions of copies were published in translation and sold abroad. It was taken up by Western radicals such as the Black Panthers and passed around as a samizdat text in the Warsaw Pact nations, where the USSR's split from China ensured it was banned. Mao's successor, Deng Xiaoping, disliked the book and tried to suppress it, says Lees, but this only served as a kind of viral marketing. While its appeal today may be nostalgic or even kitsch, McDonald's stunt may have temporarily boosted its British sales since his speech, The Sun reported left-wing bookshops have sold out of it. So they're talking about, the reason they're bringing this up is because John McDonnell, the deputy head of the Labour Party in Britain, is an acknowledged Marxist. Okay, I'll bring up his photo. He talked all the time about changing the economy and being a cooperative economy. This is him over here. John McDonnell, this is the guy. You see my cursor. This is him with Jeremy Corbyn, who's his superior at the Labour Party. So he's a fucking communist, okay? And he uses Mao's Red Book, and he got into a bit of a tiff in England for using it. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because the Black Panthers, which Assata Shakur was a part of, used to give out the Red Book too. And here's some quotations from it. It says, "Every communist must grasp the truth. Political power grows out of the barrel of a gun." So why would they distribute literature like that to people in the United States? "All reactionaries are paper tigers." This is another quote. "In appearance, the reactionaries are terrifying, but in reality, they are not so powerful." That's a very famous quote. He says, "A revolutionary is not a dinner party or writing an essay or painting a picture or doing embroidery. A revolution." So this is another thing she says, that he says in the book. "A revolution is not a dinner party or writing an essay or painting a picture or doing embroidery. A revolution is an insurrection, an act of violence by which one class overthrows another." So not only is Assata Shakur a communist because she's more radical than the Black Panthers were a communist group, and they used to distribute the quotations of Chairman Mao, the Little Red Book. And notice the paragraph above that. Okay, going back here. "It was taken up by Western radicals such as the Black Panthers and passed around as a samizdat text in the Warsaw Pact nations, where the USSR split from China and ensured it was banned." So remember, in the USA, you could get the quotations of Chairman Mao because we have the first fucking amendment. In the USSR, they banned the book because they believed that Mao was a deviation from their form of communism, and vice versa. Mao thought that the Soviet Union was betraying communism. So in the communist world, it depended what stream of communism we were from. If you believed in Chairman Mao, you looked at the Red Book as a guide to how to carry out the revolution. If you were from the Soviet side, you typically looked at Mao as kind of this deviationist and kind of on the extreme end of the movement. Lennon McCarthy's here. Thanks. Carlos 77X, hey, at least number 80 brings up policies to be discussed. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. He never does. Every single this is the funny thing. Carlos is also calling me out, even though he said he wants policies to be discussed. But I did discuss his policy. Okay, and you're not the only person who gets to pick the topics. This is what number 80 wanted to talk about, and he has just as much of a right to talk about it too. Lennon McCarthy, hi Carlos, welcome here. It's funny that Carlos joined, but number 80 claims that he has a term paper. Well, from here, he can get a whole doctoral thesis on getting his ass kicked. The rapper 10,000, also thank you. The rapper 10,000, I think you're from Chicago, right? So we're going to be talking about Farrakhan feminism later. Lennon McCarthy, by the way, earlier, fantastic trolling on the Lionel channel. So I just wanted to say hi to you guys before I go on. So he says, I only suggest points. I don't tell you what to do, dude. LOL. No, you're saying that we're not talking about policy, but we are talking about policy. We're talking about gun policy. And the whole premise of the argument, the whole premise of the fucking argument is this, that he's asking why it's a problem that children are going outside during a school session. They're going outside during a school session to protest against gun ownership. And they're using the chant of a communist revolutionary during a school-approved protest. So they're using Assata Shakur, who murdered a police officer with an illegal handgun, to protest gun ownership. So that's the policy here. This is the policy discussion. The policy discussion is that number 80 doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Okay, and you know, we had this discussion off air. He told me to explain it. It doesn't need more explanation, but we're just going to keep doing it because he never accepts any evidence. Notice that when I bring evidence, I think you guys are talking about the new Black Panther Party, which, by the way, is coming up. By the way, the new Black Panther Party is different from the one I'm talking about. So you guys should you know, stay tuned for that. So again, he says, well, how can you prove that she's a communist? Well, okay, so she was part of the Black Panther Party, which distributed communist literature, the Mao's Little Red Book of quotations. She also fought for class struggle with the Black Liberation Army, not just racial struggle, but class struggle. And then she escapes from prison and runs away to not Mexico, but to Cuba. She doesn't run away to Thailand, she runs away to Cuba. She doesn't run away to Colombia, she runs away to Cuba. She doesn't run away to Algeria, she runs away to Cuba. She doesn't run away to, I mean, who else do we not have relations with at the time? I mean, she ran away to Cuba. How much more fucking proof do I need? It's 1979. She escapes from prison and runs away to Cuba. By the way, we didn't have an extradition treaty with Mexico back then. So she ran away to Cuba. And if you need more evidence of this, this is from the Liberation News newspaper from the Party of Socialism and Liberation, which is aligned with, they are a communist party here in the US. They're openly communist. They just call themselves, another thing, he kept arguing, well, maybe they're socialist. Maybe they're not really communist. I asked him to explain the difference. Wouldn't do it. Number 80 wouldn't do it. Still won't do it. Still pretends that I have to provide the proof. He says, well, she's not a communist. She could be a socialist. Well, what's the difference between communism and socialism? I don't know, man. There's a difference. That's his answer. So they published this, which is not an interview with her, but it's a reprint of words from her biography. And it says, the following excerpts are taken from Assata, an autobiography by Black revolutionary socialist Assata Shakur. Her heroism continues to inspire a new generation of freedom fighters. She says, I wasn't against communism, but I can't say I was for it either. At first, I viewed it suspiciously as some kind of white man's concoction until I read works by African revolutionaries and studied the African liberation movements. Revolutionaries in Africa understood that the question of African, so here we go. Here we fucking go, number 80, motherfucker. Check fucking mate. Okay? Revolutionaries in Africa understood that the question of African liberation was not just a question of race, that even if they managed to get rid of the white colonialists, if they didn't rid themselves of the capitalistic economic structure, the white colonialists would simply be replaced by black neo-colonialists. There was not a single liberation movement in Africa that was not fighting for socialism. So they say socialism, but she's in Cuba. The whole thing boiled down to a simple equation. Anything that has any kind of value is made, mined, grown, produced, and processed by working people. So why shouldn't working people collectively own that wealth? Why? Why? Number 80, why? Motherfucker. You got any answer for that? Why shouldn't working people collectively own that wealth? That's Joanne Chesimard asking you that. Why? Why shouldn't working people own and control their own resources? Capitalism meant that rich businessmen owned the wealth, while socialism meant that the people who made the wealth owned it. I got into heated arguments with sisters or brothers. Okay, here she goes. She's now she starts arguing with the other black radicals. So here we go. I got into heated arguments with sisters or brothers who claimed that the oppression of black people was only a question of race. I argued that there were black oppressors as well as white ones. That's why you've got blacks who support Nixon or Reagan or other conservatives. Black folks with money have always tended to support candidates who they believed would protect their financial interests. As far as I was concerned, it didn't take too much brains to figure out that black people are oppressed because of class as well as race, because we are poor and because we are black. Earlier in my life, when someone asked me what communism was, I opened my mouth to answer, and then realized I didn't have the faintest idea. My image of a communist came from a cartoon. It was a spy with a black trench coat and a black hat pulled over his face, slinking around corners. That's very ironic, given that's exactly what she ended up doing. I never forgot that day. We're taught at such an early age to be against communists, yet most of us don't have the faintest idea what communism is. Only a fool lets somebody else tell him who his enemy is. It's going to be one of the most basic principles of living. Always decide who your enemies are for yourself and never let your enemies choose your enemies for you. So, I mean, I think it's pretty self-explanatory here. You have this person calling for revolutionary socialism. I see here Lennon McCarthy, very ironic nickname, but he's Lennon McCarthy's actually been on this show too. So they're arguing about what democratic socialism is. He says, I think communists could be considered a type of socialist. Democratic socialist is a hybrid with capitalism. There are different shades of socialists. Well, this isn't democratic socialism because she's talking about a revolutionary struggle, which is not democracy. So it by definition is not revolutionary socialism. So it has to be a different type of socialism. So that would be one that's further along the spectrum. And that would include armed revolution, which is exactly what she was doing. That's why she fled to Cuba. She didn't flee to Sweden. She fled to Cuba. She didn't flee to Yugoslavia. She fled to Cuba. Yugoslavia being, a state that ran against the Soviet Union. They were socialists, but they were, you get the point. She didn't run to Italy. She ran to Cuba. She didn't go. By the way, if she would have gone to France, I don't think France has an extradition treaty with the U.S. either. So she could have gone to Cuba and then fled to France. What would have been the problem there? Also, Carlos, are you still in the chat? I have something to notify you of. If you're in the chat, please say something in the chat to see if you're still here. Want to make sure that you hear it. In any case, there's another article by another magazine. Okay, Carlos. So you're saying that I'm not talking about policy, but I actually started out this broadcast talking about what? If somebody else, Carlos, if you joined late, somebody else can tell you. I didn't start out talking about number 80 and his bullshit. So how about Pinochet? You were here at the beginning. What did I talk about at the beginning? I realize that Pinochet might be some ADD whacked out guy too, but one of you guys probably remembers what I was talking about, and it wasn't this stuff. I specifically saved this for the middle. Okay, that's what I thought. So I started out talking about the authorization of use of military force in. Yeah, here you go. So Pinochet says the war with Yemen, and another thing. What was the second thing? Pinochet, the second thing. Hint, hint. It has to do with horse. Has to do with China white. Has to do with what else? Yayo, rocks. Ganja. Does that ring a bell? Anybody? What was the second thing I talked about today? What was the second thing? No, nobody wants to remember that. Yes, drug legalization. So I talked about why I don't agree with either libertarians or conservatives on drug legalization, and I think it has to do with how the drugs are paid for by insurance companies. So I'm sorry, but this is I was here to call out number 80, but I think you have to share in the whole backlash today. But yeah, I do talk about policies here. We're probably going to talk about policies also tomorrow. After I get done, I'm not done with number 80, by the way, who's still full of shit. He's saying that he's doing his homework. I don't give a fuck. You are getting an education the likes of which nobody else in the country is getting right now. I'm getting your fucking ass kicked when it comes to communism and Assata Shakur. Number 80. So please tune in later. And, maybe the day, after you've gotten over your shell shock, you can come back and, kind of explain your position, which doesn't really exist. Because you're saying that there's no problem with having a communist cop killer here. Yeah, I'm just giving Carlos a hard time. Carlos knows that, I value his presence. It's just that, we've been going back and forth on this as well. Comment section and all that. So this is the gun control debate, and the gun control supporters want children, at least the ones in San Francisco, to walk outside, chant the words of a woman who killed a police officer and ran away to Cuba as validation for the fact that civilians shouldn't own guns and they should trust the police, the racist fucking police, in order to save their lives. That's number 80's position, that it totally makes sense, and it's not communist at all. Not communist at all, right? None of that. I mean, does anybody see the contradiction here? Do I have to, do I have to chop up a fucking aspirin and snort it? Okay, next piece of evidence. I know some of you might be getting tired of it. So there's also a video. I have the link in the description where the Venceremos Brigade visited Assata Shakur in 1991 and no, 1992. Who are the Venceremos Brigade? Let me show you. They are a group of former SDS students for Democratic Society that cooperated with Cuba during the Cold War. They were basically American students who were radicalized and acted as revolutionaries here in the U.S. in order to support Cuba and the Soviet Union in their fight against the United States. So it said in 1969, a coalition of young people formed the Venceremos Brigade, which means we shall overcome, as a means of showing solidarity with the Cuban Revolution by working side by side with Cuban workers and challenging U.S. policies towards Cuba, including the economic blockade of our government's ban on travel to the island. The first brigades participated in sugar harvests in Cuba, and subsequent brigades have done agricultural and construction work in many parts of the island. So let me review. She hangs out with people who were communist revolutionaries, and this guy's name is Ken Snodgrass, by the way. The video. So the video is in the link. The video link is in the description, and you can watch it. And they're basically these communist students from the U.S. who work in order to promote the Cuban Revolution. Okay, that's their purpose. So how many more pieces of evidence do I fucking need? Number 80. See if there's any comments in the chat. No water today, Mr. Lennon McCarthy. We're having some orange juice and some Tanqueray. We're having some good brain drinks. You have the orange juice and you have the Tanqueray. Got some comments. Lennon McCarthy says, look at the deep state to see their attack on the Bill of Rights and plan for gun control. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they want the gun control. So you have these students supporting the deep state to get gun control passed, and they're using communist slogans. Rapper 10,000 says, speaking of guns, that march in Washington, D.C. is going to happen soon by the same feminist teachers. Also, people have kicked pro-gun students from the march. Cal wants unarmed. Well, okay, so let's not also forget that there were people who refused to participate in the march, and they were censured by the school. They were either suspended or whatever. By the way, there was a high school very close to where I used to work that actually they didn't approve the march outside, the students going outside and marching out, and they actually punished some students for participating in the gun walkout. Okay, so it does go both ways. I personally don't give a fuck. If you want to walk out of class and be a retard, that's fine. I used to skip class all the time, and I don't even have a fucking cause. The cause is I hate school. Okay, so I didn't need a cause or any sort of pretext to cut school. It was basically what I did all the time until basically college. And yeah, it does go both ways, but that's the way it is. Arkansas did punish their students for the walkout. Pinochet says, ever notice how when Democrats give speeches about gun control, they're surrounded by armed guards? Yeah, absolutely. Michael Moore, who produced Bowling for Columbine, who is basically a fucking communist as well. And if you're getting tired of me calling people fucking communists, you might start getting tired of the channel. But Michael Moore produced a movie called Sicko, where he claimed that Cuba's health system was better than the United States. So that's the way it is. Why is it not letting me show? Let me see if I can adjust the comments, because I keep having to uncensor some of your comments. So live chat, yeah, you guys should be good. So, with all due respect to anybody there that's objecting, Assata Shakur is a fucking communist, and we're still not done. We're still not fucking done. We're not done. We have another article from the Communist Party of Great Britain. They have this youth wing called Red Youth. Okay. And they said, Assata Shakur, Black women in the fight for liberation and socialism. I think it actually might be similar to everything that's that we said before. So they're basically using her biography in order to promote communism. So you might ask, well, why is it that this has anything to do with her? I mean, are they just using her image in order to promote their cause? So it says, the party was founded on an eclectic ideological basis, but it included many ideas and theories from Marx, Engels, Lenin, Mao, and Castro. Unsurprisingly, in the context of the times, the influence of Mao Zedong and China's great proletarian cultural revolution was strong, as was and this is talking about the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party. was strong, as was the party's friendship with Kim Il-sung's Democratic People Republic of Korea, which sheltered many escaped Panther members. So here you go. Here you fucking go, number 80. How many, I mean, are you getting tired yet? Are you tired yet of taking it in the face? The BPP openly and repeatedly praised the socialist revolutions in Vietnam, Cuba, and China. In its early years, the party also raised money to buy shotguns, which they openly carried while on patrol, by selling copies of quotations of Chairman Mao. Comrade Assata left the Black Panther Party in the tumultuous years that followed the McCarthyite political repression that the CIA led by Hoover. So they also make an incorrect inference. Hoover led the FBI, not the CIA. So if you think communists are more educated than other people, they're kind of giving away the impression that, you know, they can't read a fucking book now. The CIA was led by, I think his name was Allen Dulles. Unleashed on the Black liberation and socialist movements under the code name COINTELPRO, and which saw many Panthers summarily executed by the state. She would later join the Black Liberation Army. As a result of defending herself from an assassination attempt by the state, Comrade Shakur was found guilty by U.S. courts of several crimes, including the killing of one New Jersey state trooper and the wounding of another. She escaped from prison in 1979 and has been living in Cuba in political asylum since 1984. There have been multiple attempts to extradite her. In 1997, Carl Williams, superintendent of the New Jersey State Police, wrote a letter to John Paul II requesting him to raise the issue of Shakur's extradition during his talks with President Fidel Castro. Since 2005, the FBI has classified her, Comrade Assata, a domestic terrorist. In 2013, the FBI made Shakur the first woman to feature on its list of most wanted terrorists, and a $2 million bounty was offered for her capture. Comrade Shakur, like thousands of other young revolutionary women in the 1960s, took a stand against the injustices of the imperialist system and has remained a firm anti-imperialist fighter until this day. A generation of young Black Americans fought bravely in the ranks of the Black Panther Party and the other revolutionary organizations of those times, and faced immense hardship and the brutality of the United States police and secret services. Assata stands tall today as an example to a whole new generation of women, dare to struggle and dare to win. So why are we reading all this? And what exactly does it mean? I think I missed a bunch of these comments. McCarthy says, such blatant bullshit going on. This shit couldn't go down this way in front of everyone this way when I was a kid, but we're in a weird time like the 60s, but weirder. Rapper 10,000 says, okay, so he's repeating, ironically, the Roger Waters line from Another Brick in the Wall. Carlos, I think the best interpretation of the Second Amendment is people have exact same rights to arm as government. Washington said so, in other words. Well, okay, so let me be clear about that. Yeah, the Black Panthers were for the right to bear arms, but shouldn't that be a counter argument for this march for school safety and gun violence? I mean, if you're using a Black Panther, alumnus to prove the point, you're actually using somebody who was for gun. By the way, I have some scissors here too. They're the round tipped. So I'm using it to defend myself from anybody that comes into my house, just so nobody gets threatened, because I believe in the UK it's also illegal to have knives. Anyway, look, you don't have any fucking case, number 80, when you watch this later. By the way, he said he would be watching and shitposting in the chat, but he's not. So when you watch it, number 80, remember, this is the day you got boot stomped by Reason. You got boot stomped by people actually making an argument and using proof. Assata Shakur was a communist revolutionary who cooperated with the Venceremos Brigade, a Cuban sympathizing organization that wanted to promote the communist revolution of Cuba in the United States. And she had her own organization, the Black Liberation Army, that had virtually the same thing, but for black people as opposed to Cubans. And other than that, she defected to Cuba after escaping from prison. They claim that she was resisting summary execution, but then how was she captured and brought to trial if they were going to execute her? And she was a fugitive at the time of arrest, so you're allowed to shoot at fugitives. Okay, if you escaped arrest and you've resisted the police, summary execution is not the case. It means that you've resisted arrest and people can shoot at you. And if you want an explanation on that, you should watch Abby Martin's videos on the demonstrations in Venezuela. She apparently has no problem with police shooting protesters in Venezuela, because Venezuela, they're woke police. The police there are woke. Bold like a leopard, do you realize that those feminists and this gynocentric culture are creating this cycle of violence in the schools with the drugs and emasculating men, thus resulting in the shootings? Yeah, we might talk a little about that with Alicia tomorrow. J-Man Truth Seeker says, pretty sure Bold Like the Leopard was the one that said Black Lives Matter is a group that is anti-blacks and promotes the death happening in Chicago by getting rid of cops. Well, I'm not the one who said that. There's plenty of people who say that. And I think that I'm not a pro-police person. I'm a pro-Second Amendment person. And if Black Lives Matter is actually fighting for gun control today, then it would mean that they're actually fighting against one of the primary, all the other stuff that the Black Panther Party was for. I'd probably disagree with most of it, but they were strong Second Amendment supporters. I'm not going, and I think Ronald Reagan tried to restrict their Second Amendment, which he was wrong for. And I'll never pretend that it's not wrong. I can disagree with Ronald Reagan too. When he's wrong about something, he's wrong, and they were right. The Second Amendment does cover everybody. It doesn't cover convicted felons, though. So Assata Shakur, when she murdered a police officer, was not, her Second Amendment rights were not they were not covering that. When you use a weapon in order to assault a police officer or to commit an armed robbery, you've given up your Second Amendment rights, just like you've given up a number of your other rights. That's why they read you your Miranda rights when you get arrested. Okay. So I want to hear a vote. Does anybody think that there needs to be any more proof that Assata Shakur is a fucking communist? Okay, so we have Pinochet, J-Man, who's here. I think, yeah. Welcome back. Carlos, you can vote too. Rapper 10,000. Everybody, please take a vote. Do you need any more proof that Assata Shakur was a communist? Okay, feel free to vote yes or no in the chat. Okay, every one of you just put yes or no in the chat right now, and we can decide this right now, or we can wait for number 80 to pop on, which he won't do today, but in the future, I'm sure he's going to bring this up. The rapper 10,000. Does that mean no, you don't need any more proof? Len McCarthy says yes. Okay, so you do need more proof. I can dig up more proof on that. J-Man says no. Carlos is holding out. He's a hard vote. He's kind of, Carlos is kind of like okay, no more proof. You got, oh, I believe number 80 is watching. So I see David Walton has joined us. Do you need any more proof, David Walton, who is number 80? I don't think that's his real name, though. I think his real name is something like, Scrody McBoogerballs. Lennon McCarthy. Yes, she's a communist. You afraid it's weird. It's all backwards. Black Lives Matter is anti-black, and Antifa are fascist wannabes. I don't think Black Lives Matter is anti-black. I think they're anti-freedom, and they're against people's. Didn't watch the whole segment. I guess I don't need more proof. Carlos said, "Look, Carlos, look. This is a woman who was in a struggle for several years. She was a Black Panther, distributed communist literature. Okay, the argument isn't whether she's right or wrong. The argument is whether she's a communist or not. So, you can go back, watch the whole segment, research her yourself, research her rhetoric, research all the communist groups that draw inspiration from her, and she's never said, "Well, I disavow." I disavow. Remember when people keep asking for Donald Trump to disavow the Ku Klux Klan? Why won't Joanne Chesimard, aka Assata Shakur, renounce the Venceremos Brigade, renounce the Party of Socialism and Liberation, renounce Venezuela, who also they use her all the time in their political propaganda. I think Abby Martin might have done a segment on her. Yeah, Empire Files, Assata Shakur. Yeah, they did. Trump targets Assata Shakur. This is from, Telesur English. Okay, so Telesur, which is the state propaganda arm of Venezuela, they own the majority of it. So here you go. Donald Trump targeted her. I love this guy's name, Ferrari Shepherd. Okay, so she's basically the darling of the Latin American communist left. BLM is run by feminists who hate men. In the long run, they would destroy the Black community by letting immigrants in. Well, technically, there's a argument there that third world immigration is basically replacing Native Black Americans as the unskilled labor force. One of the solutions would be to educate people to become a skilled labor source, to learn the trades. But by the way, a lot of the third world immigrants from South America and Mexico and whatever, they're also taking over the trades, especially in construction. Who the hell is this idiot? I think we have a spammer. Let's see. I think I just see if he keeps going. Everybody, look, we have a spammer. Isn't that fun? See, what's funny, I like your sunglasses. I don't have them right now, so maybe later. Says you are mom. Let's let him in. Lennon McCarthy. I'll let you decide. I'll make you the moderator. How about you decide if this is spam or not? Look at that. I'm not intolerant. I'm having Lennon McCarthy as the moderator. So, you decide if this guy. I mean, I'll leave it up to somebody else. I don't believe in extrajudicial execution, so I'm going to let the jury decide here. So everybody, for this guy 4ER312, please 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 let me know if you want this guy to stay. Okay, let him stay. Whatever. What else is going on? What else is going on? Farrakhan feminism, everybody. There's going to be another produced video. Probably going to be working on it tomorrow. Hopefully, will be released by the end of the week about stage 3 of Farrakhan feminism. Now, we're not going to go over the whole thing, but long and the short of it, there's 2 different angles to the whole problem. Angle A, Keith Ellison and 6 other members of the Congressional Black Caucus and the Democratic Caucus in Congress, they have past associations or interactions with Farrakhan that are looked at as problematic because Louis Farrakhan has said some things that are perceived as anti-Semitic, probably because he said things like the Jews are his enemy and that they're bloodsuckers and things like that. So, for the, every time I go on, I try to make it clear. I'm a freedom of speech supporter, and that includes Louis Farrakhan. So I don't believe in silencing Louis Farrakhan's right to free speech. In fact, I find it better that he's able to communicate in an uncensored way on YouTube through his numerous pod people that love every fucking thing he says. Because I can use it for research. I can find his things and I can write about it, and that actually gives me the means to talk about it. I'm against censorship for that reason, because if it were a system where things like this were kept off of the internet, people wouldn't know where to look for this information, to validate certain arguments that we're making, or to to discuss these issues. So I am not arguing that Louis Farrakhan should be censored because he's a hateful person or anything. To tell you the truth, his discourses are a bit entertaining for me because just watch him. So anybody out there who is with the Nation of Islam, go ahead. I'm not telling you to shut up or not follow Louis Farrakhan or something. I'd probably say I think he's out of his mind, but he can go on and say whatever he wants. Let's take a glance at the chat. I think he is a Tommy Wiseau copycat based on his grammar. Carlos, we have to talk about. Have you seen that movie? Because I recently saw it in theaters, The Room. So I don't want to get off topic, but I love that reference. There's no style of grammar. This guy is a troll. This guy's good. This guy is good. This guy, Lennon McCarthy, I fully approve. Keep 4ER312R11R. Okay, to keep going, let's talk. So, Farrakhan feminism. Why is it a new stage here? So, like I said, the Democratic Party, they complain all the time about racism coming from the right, and in some cases, they even talk about people on the left being anti-Semitic or racist or sexist when it's convenient for them. For example, Len McCarthy, do you think there was more than one bomber in Texas? I really couldn't say, because I think there might be, because it sounds kind of suspicious that the guy would blow himself up so easily. I think that there could be more than one, but I'm not fully abreast of the details. And speaking of abreast, tomorrow we're going to be talking about transgenderism with Alicia Clegg. So we're going to be talking about breasts and other genitalia, or genitalia tomorrow night at 8:30 Eastern time with Alicia Clegg. So no, I don't think that there was just one bomber on first glance, but there's probably better sources than me. So please stay tuned to other people who are better informed about that. Um, yeah, sorry, yeah, the rapper 10,000. Who did I say it was you that said it, Lennon? So again, back to the Farrakhan feminism. So the Democratic Party, they constantly harp on isms and obics and phobes and phobics, isms, phobics, and things like that. They talk about all of these issues that they claim include prejudice. They said Bernie Sanders was sexist against Hillary Clinton. Now, those of you who have been watching, I know Bernie Sanders fans. I have maybe two of them in the chat. Lennon McCarthy for sure was a Bernie bro. So is Carlos. I never ever liked Bernie Sanders. I always kind of hated him, but I'll say this for sure: he's not a sexist. There was a Vermont feminist collective that named him an honorary woman at one point, and I'm not joking. I'm being totally serious. He's always stood up for feminists. And I think it's kind of preposterous to why is it that this keeps getting flagged? The rapper 10,000. I'm coming up on that actual topic that you're talking about. So that's the issue here. So that they keep talking about the prejudice of people that they dislike. I'm gonna minimize the chat just so I can focus because I keep seeing your guys' funny comments. So then they talk about Charlottesville. They say, "Oh, Donald Trump in Charlottesville. Donald Trump, he's a bigot. He's a Nazi or whatever." Well, Donald Trump wasn't involved in Charlottesville. If you remember that weekend, he was actually engaged in a lot of action regarding North Korea. He wasn't engaged at all with Charlottesville. None of the people associated with him directly participated in the march. Some of the people that were at the march were supporters of his, but that was like about probably 700 people. 700 people that included people all over the spectrum, just Confederate enthusiasts to full-on National Socialists. And there was also the Antifa people there. But they still hold it over his head. They say, well, it's his fault that Charlottesville happened. How? How is it his fault? What does he have to do with it? He didn't organize the march. He wasn't there. He didn't speak at it. He didn't speak to it. He didn't acknowledge it. He didn't endorse it. Nothing. There's nothing tying him to the march except for the fact that some people there support him. Okay. On the other hand, with Farrakhan, you have 7 members of Congress who have accepted his support and had ties with him at a certain point. You have the deputy chair of the DNC, Keith Ellison, who at one point was an organizer for the Million Man March and therefore was, engaged in activities for the Nation of Islam. He was a member of the Nation of Islam. His name originally was Keith X before he went back to using Ellison. He converted to the Nation of Islam from Catholicism, later converted to Sunni Islam. So for many years, he was associated with Farrakhan. So this week, he had to write a letter denying he was ever associated with Louis Farrakhan. And in this piece that I wrote, which you can see, who is texting me? Somebody's texting me about this thing that I sent him a while ago. So, I'm just gonna have to deal with that later. Here, I'll show it on screen. So this is progressives try, but they can't contain the Farrakhan feminism wildfire. So you have all this stuff. We're going to get to the Women's March too. But Keith Ellison, he wrote a piece in Medium denying ever having ties to Louis Farrakhan and claiming that the extent of his involvement was having helped to organize the Million Man March. Titled, "I have fought against hate my entire career," Ellison's post never addresses Louis Farrakhan's video claim from February that the two and Andre Carson had met in a hotel room in Washington, D.C. in 2016. In his post, Ellison called Nation of Islam leader Mr. Farrakhan instead of Mr. Farrakhan. So that's the only important thing that I gathered from here. I love this guy. He talks like Yoda. Everybody say hello to this guy. This guy is fantastic. Went too far, jumped the shark. Who is the guy? Len McCarthy says, ex-Bernie bro, he jumped the shark when he endorsed Hillary. Hillbots push sexism because it's a talking point. Yeah, but, you know, like I said, even early in the broadcast, you know, some of you guys might have missed it. I don't know if you were there, Lennon McCarthy, but I said, you know, when Bernie says something that I think is correct, like he opposed the war powers measure today, or he said that you know, President Trump must get a war powers measure for Yemen. I said he was right. So when Bernie Sanders is right, you don't have to pretend that he's wrong just because you don't. I don't like him. I never have. But he was right today, and we shouldn't pretend that he was wrong. I think I know who this dude is. I'm pretty sure that this guy is somebody I went to high school with. But thanks for sticking around, buddy. Did you finally get a Google account? Anyway, so talking about Farrakhan, this is why Keith Ellison's denial is so ridiculous, and it's very simple. One of the things that he talks about is that the Million Man March was what brought him to actually have any affiliation with Louis Farrakhan. The fact of the matter is that he was involved in the Nation of Islam before the Million Man March. He was involved that while in college. I believe it was at Wayne State University. Type his name in. I think he went to Wayne State. Yeah, he went to Wayne State University over in Detroit. He was involved in the Nation of Islam there for several years. He used to write under the name Keith X. You know, his involvement in the Nation of Islam happened for several years. Okay, it says even as a law student in 1989 to 1990, Ellison wrote several columns under the name Keith E. Hakim in the student newspaper, the Minnesota Daily. So that's at the University of Minnesota. He defended Farrakhan against claims of racism and further wrote that Farrakhan is also not an anti-Semite and called affirmative action a sneaky form of compensation for slavery, suggesting instead that white Americans pay reparations to blacks. Mother Jones reported that under the name Keith X. Ellison, he wrote defenses of Farrakhan against accusations of anti-Semitism after the 1995 Million Man March and again in 1995. So this is from last year. It's Keith Ellison is everything Republicans thought Obama was. Maybe he's just what Democrats need. So, okay, I mean, we've featured this before on the channel. So anybody who's doubting that, it's the truth. But that's not where Farrakhan feminism ends. It's not just Keith Ellison, although he is. I mean, first of all, he's denying that he was at a meeting 2 years ago with Farrakhan in a hotel room. That Farrakhan has himself said, "Oh yeah, the meeting happened." His other congressional colleague, Andre Carson, has said, "Yeah, we met at the hotel room. I met with Farrakhan," but he won't admit that Ellison was there. So the problem here is not anti-Semitism, because there's nothing unconstitutional about hating Jews. It might be distasteful. There might be issues that you know, they reflect on your character, but it's still legal under the laws and protections of the Bill of Rights. You can see the Skokie trial for that if anybody needs help. You know, it's been validated in the courts. You're allowed to be bigoted, you know, racist and hate monger. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you can't be. However, what's the problem here is that these people are liars. And I've explained before that Farrakhan has made comments, and you can look at my videos where he says, you know, women who won't cook for their kids, they're lazy, and they're poisoning their kids if they take them to McDonald's, and McDonald's affects the woman's egg and the man's sperm and things like that. You know, he's not somebody who, and you know, he's made plenty of comments that um, you know, attack the feminization of men. I come for your sunglasses, I stay for your hair. Yeah, this guy is definitely a troll, man. I love this guy. Anyway, sorry, but the other issue is with the Women's March. So the Women's March, a lot of people are also making the issue about anti-Semitism. So Farrakhan is one of the least pro women's rights leaders that you can find in any religion, pretty much anywhere. He says women should stay in the home, men should be the breadwinner, all of that stuff. Um, doesn't believe in the feminization of men. So we've had people who have left the Women's March this week or last week. You have Alyssa Klein, who was their leader, their social media director, left the movement. That's all in the article. You can see it over here once I get the screen showing. So there's a lot of people who are stepping down. You even had an appearance on The View by Valerie Jarrett, where she kind of threw a bit of shade at Tamika Mallory, who's the Women's March board member that is a huge fan of Farrakhan. But she also said that it was because she was a young leader and she would learn to know better. But Tamika Mallory is 37 years old and has an 18-year-old son, so she's older than me. She's pretty old. You know, she's older. She's 5 years older than the youngest member of Congress, and she's 1 year older than Ivanka Trump. And we all know that people give Ivanka Trump shit all the time. Um, so then you have all these other people, Mariam Harari, who's an Indian Muslim, who said that she resents the fact that, you know, the Women's March won't stand up for Jews or whatever. You have a Jewish Women's March official, Sophie Elman Golan, tweeted, I'm tired of our movements not taking anti-Semitism seriously. It's not okay. So she doesn't leave yet. She probably will leave at some point. There was a religious high school, Jewish liberal, religious high school, where there was a bunch of liberal social justice warriors who were so triggered by this that they wouldn't take part in the gun walkout, which was organized, by the way, by the Women's March. So they were so triggered that they held the walkout at a different hour. So that they were so pissed off about this that they said, well, I guess we're just going to waste time and do something that doesn't change anything at a different time. Um, so then the Florida group basically said that they were disappointed in the Florida Women's March. So the local affiliate said that they were disappointed in the national movement. And they said to supporters that they're independent and have nothing to do with the national movement. And then you had all these newspapers that have been condemning them. So the Women's March is suffering a lot from this. And then and then also there was I had an update earlier this week. You might have seen it, that Congressman Danny Davis affirmed that he accepts Farrakhan support and said that he needs it to get elected. And he says, this is a quote, so politics is different from other things. This is electoral politics. You have to get elected, and you have to get 51% of the people vote for you if you want to be elected. Now, you don't have to be elected, but if you want to be elected, then you got to do the things that will help you get elected. Otherwise, you won't be elected. Those are his reasons for he needs Farrakhan's support in order to get elected. That's his exact quote. And you can see that in the story. And I'll post the link in the chat, even though it's already in the description, but please read it. So, you know, again, I have no problem with them having, you know, issues. What's this? Oh, the troll's gone. I wanted him to stay. The fuck? So, I posted the article in the chat. And again, the issue here is that the Women's March cannot at any point claim to be feminist anymore when they have Linda Sarsour, a Sharia law supporter, on their board, as well as Tamika Mallory, who is a supporter of Louis Farrakhan, who basically says that women who can't cook are horrible mothers. Yeah, I wish that guy had stayed. That guy was cracking me up. Getting bored because talking about stuff doesn't actually change anything. Going to do something else. Goodbye. So you see, we didn't have to ban him. He just left because he was bored. What else? So the juiciest part of this issue, the juiciest part of Farrakhan feminism today, is not to do with the Women's March. It doesn't have anything to do with Mr. Ellison, who, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned, he called him Mr. Farrakhan instead of by his title, Minister Farrakhan. So he's pretending that he's breaking with Farrakhan by, insulting him. I still call him Minister Farrakhan, and I don't agree with him. I don't have any problem using his title. So here we go. To make things worse, several members of the Black activist left have come forward and demanded that the CBC's leaders stand with Louis Farrakhan as opposed to condemning him, as numerous members of the Jewish community have. They're planning to go to Congress and lobby Representative Todd Rokita of Indiana, who's a Republican, to drop his resolution calling on the House to condemn Farrakhan and instead create one condemning Trump. The three members of this coalition are Al Sharpton, the MSNBC television host. So for those of you that are out there, tweet to MSNBC this article, which is in the chat, and ask them, why is Louis Farrakhan getting support from one of your media figures when he's such an he just hates the Jews, hates the friggin' Jews, also is a huge women hater, and also has said that he will lift up the skirt of the Pope and expose him for who he is when he was talking about John Paul II. So you have an anti-Catholic, anti-feminist, what else do we have here? Anti-white, anti-Mexican, because he said Mexican Jews are controlling America. And so why is Al Sharpton going to support him? So he incited the Crown Heights riot that was between Jews and blacks in 1991. In 1995, he called Fred Harari, the Jewish owner of Freddy's Fashion Mart in New York City, a white interloper, and incited against him during protests over the eviction of a black tenant by Harari. Then so this is, I'm going to highlight this. You're talking about violence and incitement. Then one of Sharpton's supporters, Roland Smith, broke into the store with an illegal handgun and gasoline after starting a fire that would kill 7 employees. Smith killed himself with his own weapon. So, talking about supporting marches or whatever, this guy, Al Sharpton, had a supporter who went to a rally organized by Al Sharpton against a store in I think it was in Harlem, owned by a Jewish guy who was evicting a black subtenant, because there was a black church that was renting out the building to Harari, and they asked him to get rid of this record store owner. So the record store owner goes to Al Sharpton and says, hey, I need you to get this guy to get off my back. So he goes there, calls the guy a white interloper, starts inciting against him for weeks on end. And finally, one of his supporters breaks in, pours gasoline all over the place and holds the people hostage, and then kills himself after, 7 of them die of smoke inhalation. Okay, then you have Black Lives Matter. They've also had some anti-Semitic incidents, but not anything explicitly violent. More things that have gone on in Seattle, where they attacked a Jewish pot store owner, calling him a gentrifier and claiming he was an IDF soldier when he wasn't. So I have a video link there. Everything I have, by the way, is linked, number 80. So when you're watching this later, just take the link to the article, and the article will have links to video and news articles. That's how I present proof. I wrote this whole thing, and I back up my argument with proof. And finally, and this is, so get ready for the video tomorrow, another produced video. The third member of this coalition to support Farrakhan. is the new Black Panther Party. Somebody mentioned them in the chat earlier, which is a group that was founded in 1989 and later led by Khalid Abdul Muhammad, a preacher considered so hateful that he was expelled from Farrakhan's Nation of Islam in 1993 after a rant at Keene College in New Jersey. And I have a video here in which he called Jews bloodsuckers, Pope John Paul II a no-good cracker, and called for a white genocide in South Africa. In a clip from 2000, Mohammed, K.A. Mohammed, insulted the white female crew accompanying BBC journalist Louis Theroux, claiming they could never catch my eye. Mohammed, K.A. Mohammed, died in 2001 and was succeeded by lawyer and fellow activist Malik Zulu Shabazz, also a former NOI member. So they both left the Nation of Islam, who still is involved in the group. I think he stepped down as the group leader because he's a little older now. In 2015, he was cited by activists, anti-police activists, as one of the people that incited riots and looting in response to the death of Freddie Gray in Baltimore. So, that's it for, in terms of those updates for right now. There will be another video. Let's see what's going on in the chat for a second. He said, I signed up to his channel just in case he becomes a contender. I don't know who he's talking about. I don't care one way or another about his title. Len McCarthy says, play up homophobia. Look, I personally have no problem with Louis Farrakhan saying whatever he wants to say. Sharpton says, Al Sharpton is a race-baiting anti-Semite who caused a riot with blacks and Jews at one time. Lock him up. Yeah. I mean, there's, I mentioned that. I think the rapper 10,000 mentioned that originally, like 30 minutes ago. But yeah, Al Sharpton has he has an issue with Jews. He has issues with Italians. He has issues with all sorts of people. Also a rape hoaxer, by the way, Tawana Brawley, if anybody remembers that, the Duke Lacrosse scandal. The band's basically trash, and he's on MSNBC, and now he's supporting Louis Farrakhan. So please take that article. And the video for tomorrow, please take that video. Check back tomorrow in your YouTube updates. I hope tomorrow there will be a video, and share that with the Reverend Al on Twitter, on Facebook, anywhere you can, exposing him. He's working with Louis Farrakhan now, basically saying, and it's according to the Daily Caller, and I also have proof from one of the websites that publishes, the press releases of his organization. They're supporting Louis Farrakhan. Len McCarthy says, what about all the imams preaching terrorist shit in the UK and probably here in other countries? Yeah. I mean, there are groups like that. There's look, I think there's a difference. Here's a difference between what I'm saying is freedom of speech and what you're talking about. If you're inciting to violence, and that's what Al Sharpton did, by the way, yeah, that would be a crime, and you should probably be investigated for it. And I think the problem with that is the burden of proof. So they have to prove that your incitement caused this act of violence. So that's the hard part, Lennon McCarthy. So I wouldn't say that I'm encouraging people to be violent, but the fact is that Louis Farrakhan in the 70s and 60s was involved in, by indirectly with a number of violent issues with the Nation of Islam and Malcolm X and some other offshoots, the Hanafis and 2X McGee, I think his name was. I don't remember what his first name was, but Ernest 2X McGee, murdering 7 people that belonged to McGee's offshoot. So you have plenty of issues where he crosses the bounds of free speech. But to say that people should not be able to preach hate is a hard line. It's already hard enough to establish in a court of law that somebody has incited a crime by use of hate speech. That includes Farrakhan, that includes Al Sharpton. The fact is that he was never charged for it, probably because it would be difficult for him to be you know, for it to be proven that Roland Smith, who did commit that string of murders, or that, you know, that act of mass murder at Freddy's Fashion Mart, actually acted because of it. It's all question of, if the defense can get him off the hook, then you've kind of wasted your time with it. Now, what did Al Sharpton end up, you know, getting in trouble for? I think that with the Tawana Brawley case, he made some accusations, and some of it, and his team made accusations against a number of officials in the city where the Tawana Brawley case happened. They claimed one of the prosecutors had been a rapist and a Ku Klux Klan member. And, you know, he was later sued, and he lost the lawsuit because he had no proof. And, you know, he claimed he still never paid back the money. And there was a decision against him. McCarthy says, I think preaching terrorist type shit is a problem, and deep state is in bed with ISIS, etc. And Pinochet also mentioned Count Dankula for making fun of National Socialists. Yeah, I think we're running into, because of all the crap with Count Dankula or whatever. We're starting to see, if he can be convicted, then what about all these other people in the UK? There are, we're not talking about the US at the moment, but there are people over there that say things that are far more extreme and hateful than anything Count Dankula openly said it was a joke. So I think we covered enough today. We covered the authorization of use of military force in Yemen. We covered drug legalization. We covered number 80 getting his ass kicked in a debate that he might never show up for. We also covered, let me see, Farrakhan feminism, and a bit of the Count Dankula controversy, which I also have a video up for. So please comment in the, you know, below the description. There's a comment box. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know if you have any topics. Rapper 10,000 says, what about that Jewish joke that SJWs are pissed off about? What happened was that a small Jewish advocacy organization in Scotland, they were the ones who took offense, and I believe they filed the complaint. And they're currently losing a lot of support because of that, because people know that it's transparently stupid. The complaint is stupid. The guy didn't take it seriously. I think that they were pissed off that it was trivializing the Holocaust. But, you know, there were, you know, look, I'm not saying that the Holocaust, and you know, you guys, please, I mean, you can stay till the end or leave or whatever, but I'm just answering the Rapper 10,000's question. Yes, I'm Jewish. I have relatives from, you know, my family that perished in the Holocaust. To say that nowadays we have to stop every joke about the Holocaust would negate decades and decades of you know, humor that was based around it. And you'd have to start, you know, Jerry Seinfeld. He made that episode of Seinfeld where him and his girlfriend make out to Schindler's List, and people were, and that's kind of what this is about. The whole joke of that show, if you guys are still interested, the whole joke behind that was that he was you know, his parents shamed him because he was making out to Schindler's List, but he couldn't make out with his girlfriend anywhere else because his parents were staying with him. Do you see what's the humor in that? So they were smothering him so bad, his parents, that the only place he felt that he could get some privacy was at a theater showing of Schindler's List. So should that be banned now? Should that episode be banned? It's an ironic piece of humor, and Count Dankula is nothing different. Lennon McCarthy says springtime for Hitler. Yeah, that was one of the examples I used in the video yesterday. Look, there are things that are tragic in life that are pieces of humor. You know, Springtime for Hitler was a funny show. There are, you know, even Nazis do make jokes. You know, you look at some of their pages like Daily Stormer, they make jokes. They're correct. They're protected under our Constitution. In England, I'm not so sure. England, Scotland, and the rest of the UK. But you know, to say that because something is tragic and you know, affects a lot of people and is sad, I'm sorry, but you know, it's First Amendment. It's bad taste or whatever. The rapper 10,000 Cards Against Humanity game had a Jewish pact that was boycotted, and the funny one was about Anne Frank's diary about her girlhood business. Well, I think I'm not a fan of that Cards Against Humanity. I think they're a bunch of they themselves are social justice warriors in to a certain extent, but you know, I don't care if they produce an offensive pack of cards. I'm just not going to buy it. There's the meme, the Stalin meme. Where you just see his face. Um, I'll just show it and then we'll close. Here we go. So, you guys can draw. It says dark humor is like food. Not everyone gets it. So that's making fun of the forced famines in Ukraine. It's dark humor because starvation. That's the. I just have to say, as much as human existence has been mired by tragedy and people dying and whatever, that's the way it is. People still make jokes. There's jokes about the Mel Brooks made a joke about the Inquisition on top of the producers. If you saw History of the World Part 1, they have that song, The Inquisition, what a show, uh, that's the way it is. And if you get offended, I don't think it's you have the right to take offense. I don't think that you should be able to go to the police and put a man in prison for making a stupid video about his pug and his girlfriend and whatever. That's it. Have a great night, and we'll talk later.